we've done every single week for 7 years. And that's been a lot of hard work, probably too much hard work. I didn't think I'd be a podcaster. I'm a recruiter. Now I'm a pretty good podcaster as well.
Imagine your dream of starting a podcast finally comes to life. It's your very first podcast interview. You've lined up an incredible, impressive first guest. You hit record and bam, chainsaws start roaring outside your window. That's not a metaphor. That's the true story of today's guest, Mike Richards, on his very first podcast episode back in 2018. Fast forward to now, 2025, and he's interviewed nearly 400 of the world's top treasurers. He's built a podcast empire in a niche most people can't even define. He hosts sold-out global events, and he's had strangers stop him on the street just to say, "Wait, are you that podcast guy?" Yes, he is. I'm Deirdre Martin, triple certified and brand and business strategist, award-winning mentor, international best-selling author, and the coach who helps entrepreneurs like you scale to your first million without burning out, bottlenecking, or selling your soul by sacrificing what matters most. And today I'm handing the mic to Mike, founder of the Treasury Recruitment Company and host of the Treasury Career Corner podcast, and a master of turning boring sounding into binge worthy. And if you've ever thought, my niche is too small for a podcast, my niche is too big for a podcast, will anyone even listen to me? Hosting events sounds amazing, but also terrifying. Will anyone come? Then this episode is for you, my friend, because in the episode, you're going to discover how Mike built a podcast juggernaut in a hyper-specific niche and how you can too. The unexpected and wildly profitable business opportunities that come from podcasting and live events, and some practical tips to start small, stay consistent, and avoid the common mistakes that stop most shows before they even start. So this episode, it's totally full of story, strategy, and seriously golden nuggets. So plug in, pour your coffee, and let's dive in. Mike, welcome to the show. Thrilled to have you here.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you very much. And just, and I know that you'll be editing on bits like this. Can I just double check you will be?
Yes, yeah.
Because there's a guy with a leaf blower. Can you hear the leaf blower or not?
No, not at all.
Thank goodness. Okay.
So right. Real life podcasting, shit
real life podcasting.
Your house, dogs bark, people blow leaves, all the things.
Takes me the first ever one I did in 2018. I was so nervous. I was interviewing the global treasurer of GlaxoSmithKline. It's like, everything is ready. We are here. And then next door to me, the chainsaws broke out. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, literally the room is shaking. And I'm going like this. Yeah, they were cutting down a tree next to the podcast. And yes, you could hear that one. A leaf blower, that's fine. Chainsaws, taking it. And I was like, even she was just laughing. Luckily, she was great. And we just re-recorded it. That's the thing about podcasting. You can do it anywhere, anytime. Don't get yourself wound up about it.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, I love that because this is literally what happens in the real world. Things happen and it is nerve-wracking when you're starting out. And I know for me, I was a bit of a newsreader when I started out. Now I'm like, let's just have the chats. But let's rewind a little bit for you, Mike, because you mentioned you started your podcast in 2018. It's 2025 now, 7 years on, you've been podcasting. You're one of the few who's stuck it out because a lot of podcasting takes a lot of work and people don't realize that. I think it's like you just hit record and off you go. But we both know it's not like that. So what inspired you to start a podcast in the first place, and particularly in such a niche space like Treasury?
It was probably because of my niche. That was one of the things. So I've been a treasury recruiter for 25 years. I've loved talking to my clients. I find them really interesting. I originally thought about doing a podcast about recruitment. I was like, I talk recruitment all day. I want a break from that in a way. And I thought, actually, I like talking to treasurers. They're really interesting. Who are treasurers, by the way, for your audience? They're the finance guys that you have a CFO. They have a tax guy who tries to save all the money that they can so that you can afford your Starbucks and everything else and name drop there. You have a financial controller, today's money and backwards, and then you have a treasurer. And the treasurer they're really interesting people. They're about today's money and the future. If you want to go and buy a company, you go to your treasurer. If you want to look at your cash management, foreign exchange is all going all over the place because of different, political events and things. You go to your treasurer. What are we going to do? How are we going to plan this? We want to buy That's your treasurer. So they're interesting people. And I thought, hey, I should record my conversations with them. So 7 years ago, I started doing it. It sounds very simple. It is that with a couple of other bits. And so I thought, right, speak to a treasurer, talk to them, maybe do 10. We've now done just shy of 400, one every single week for approaching 7 years. But now it's some of the top treasurers in the world. It's just the list I've got of people that come on the show is stupid in a good way, because they've heard it. They'll have seen it on LinkedIn. They'll have seen it and they go, yeah, I'll be on your show. Oh yeah, I like your show. And, just last night I got an email from someone. Oh yeah, I listen to your show regularly. Can we have a catch up? And she's a global treasurer. And I'm like, do you listen? That's one of the things that frustrates me as well, because sometimes you can't find out who's listening. It's a big black hole of stuff, but we've worked out some ways around that, which we'll talk about later on the show with the CTP and stuff like that. But yeah, and now, I mean, it's ridiculous. We get 500-600 downloads per episode. I don't usually look at the metrics, but I have been recently, just because we partnered with the Association of Treasurers in the US, or needed to know how much the figures are. 200,000 downloads. When we first ever started the show, I thought hopefully we'll get to 100. That would be quite good. And now we're doing 500, but that's 7 years of work. And again, for your listeners, don't think of it like, oh, we need to get to 500. You don't need to get to 1 million. I always thought back then, I can't remember who told me it, but I thought maybe just myself, if I got to 50, if you got to 10 downloads, if you had 10 people sitting around a table listening to you for an hour, and then one of them became your ideal client, your ICP, amazing. But they're your client and they'll stay with you. And then what if you do 10? What if you do 100? What if you went to somewhere and you had 150 people listen to you for an hour exclusively? Isn't that amazing? Who else does that in your niche or sector or whatever? Now I do 500 and I'm like, 500 people listen to me. Yeah, it's like amazing.
Wow. And I love your show too, Mike, because it's literally, it's mostly, they're not listening to you, to be real, right? They're listening to your clients, because that's who you bring on. You bring on Treasury recruitment candidates. And, some people listening might go, Treasury, that sounds a little bit boring. My niche is a little bit boring, or my niche is a little bit too small. Or maybe my niche is like really saturated and very, there's a lot of people in it. Like my podcast is in a niche where there's a lot of people doing similar stuff to me. So for people who are listening, where they might think their niche is too small, or there's too many people doing it in terms of podcasting, what would you say to them?
Well, as the Americans say, the niches are in the riches, or the riches in niches and all that stuff. And let's talk about the small bit. No, the small is great. Small is perfectly formed. Small is, you can be, and I'm now the LinkedIn influencer in my niche, which still seems weird. And Deirdre's made me get on video and do all this stuff. But the fact is now, yeah, own your niche. All right. Yeah. So it's small. It's yours. Take it over. That's yours, and everything else. And then if you're going into a bigger, if people, I just, again, this morning, my phone lit up. I've been featured, and it's just a bit strange because we're a very specialist treasury niche. And I've been featured on someone's post from a job site, who are massive, about job hunting, 20 podcasts to build confidence, focus and clarity in your career. And they grabbed little old me. And I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm alongside some of the top. I mean, it's stupid. Find your dream job, squiggly careers. Like, these are people that, that's what I've woken up to on my phone. I was just going to say that before we started the show. I'm like, okay, thank you very much. And if someone in finance, the Treasury wants to get into Treasury because they listen to my podcast, yeah, I mean, own your niche. Don't shy away from it. Be that person.
So it's an incredible opportunity for visibility, right? And it's
stupid.
Things like that are getting you visibility. So irrespective of size or niche, go for it. That's the bottom line. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
And Mike, I know because we've worked together, right? That's why Mike just referred to Deirdre made me do videos.
Yeah, Deirdre made me. That's it. That was on the first week, and then it went on, and now eventually she doesn't make me anymore because Now we have a newsletter we do every week, which used to just be a regurgitation of the podcast. I would say you can start with that, but don't finish with that. She then said, right, you need to talk about some of your views about recruitment. I've now done it for 28 weeks? Yeah, 28 weeks. I think blog 28 we did the other day. I was approached by a YouTube guru stroke LinkedIn guru recently. I know him, he's quite a nice guy. And he just said, oh, Mike, we need to work on your social media stuff and we need to do this. I was like, I'm doing all right, actually, mate. I'm okay with mine. It was like, well, what are you doing? And I just looked back and yeah, Deirdre made me do it. I said in this last quarter, my videos, so I do the newsletter on a Tuesday, which is my personal views, which we get content writer helps us, and the podcast that comes out on the Tuesday. And then on the Friday, I do a Friday video where I just riff for about 4 to 5 minutes, keep it short and sweet, about bringing the newsletter to life and saying, this most recent one was LinkedIn words, why some of them are so annoying, and don't be a self-motivated individual, and oh, shut up. It's like, really annoying words. So we do that. And as I said to this LinkedIn guru, I said, I've had 250,000 impressions this quarter. And he was like, what? I went, yeah, 250,000. And he was like, oh, okay. Well, yeah. I said, no, I'm sticking to LinkedIn. We are doing some YouTube, but LinkedIn is where we live. So he was like, oh my God. Yeah, I was like, yeah. So we're doing all right. So if we hit 1 million for the year, we're getting in those faces of my niche all the time. That's what's important.
Loads more visibility, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. And, in terms of shows, Mike, there's a few different ways people can structure shows. So if you're listening and you're thinking, I want to start a podcast, Mike's podcast is all guests, right, Mike?
Yeah, and I've heard there was a pushback a bit the other day. Someone saying you shouldn't just do all interview show. And I can understand that this is, if you like, by doing those videos, that's my, we keep our podcast to me and a guest. In fact, no, a guest and me, because they should be doing 80% of the talking at least, and they always do. Because that's another tip as well. From my early shows, I would get really excited and I'd ask a client, someone, a client, a guest, a question, then another question. It's like, shut up, just stop. Ask one question. Be quiet, let them answer it. They might answer your other 2 questions. I know you're excited. Just calm down. Let them tell their story. And that's one of the things. So, a lot of the time people say, I listened to your podcast. And I said, well, actually, it's your podcast. And that's one of the things. And actually, by doing that, so they hear those guests and everything else. And then people have said, you need to do more solo podcasts. Well, actually, my LinkedIn stuff is like my mini version of that. And we looked at republishing it again, repackaging. I just think it's enough. There's only so much, Mike, you can put up with. So, and it's just gone strength to strength and talking to those guests. So when you are talking to them, we talk about how they started their careers, where they are now, where they see both themselves and the treasury profession going to next. It's like I've said that 400 times.
Fantastic. So overall, one of the things then for you is what you're doing is guest podcasts only. Yep. And then for you to show up and share your views and opinions, you're using LinkedIn as a platform for that, which is super. Yes. And just for people listening, if you are starting your podcast and you're thinking, oh, how do I structure it? Is it just me coming on and talking? That's an option for sure. Some people have podcasts where they do it themselves. And then there's an option where, like mine, I do a solo episode this week. Next week is a guest episode, and so on. It rotates every other week. So that's absolutely an option too. And in terms of your podcast, Mike, how did your podcast change your business model or your brand positioning?
So we started it, as I say, 7 years ago, started talking to these treasurers, started to become more and more known. If I was relaunching it, or if someone is launching it, I think just a couple of points there. You said about, doing solo episodes. Don't just talk for the sake of it. I hear a lot of podcasts and that can really turn people off as well. So don't just think, oh, I can show up to the mic. I can just riff on my ideas. Deirdre got me out of my comfort zone, but I don't want to talk at the microphone for an hour, like, moan and da-da-da. I do 5 minute. We could call it a 5 minute moan, but it's not. It's actually a reflection on stuff, and I try and keep it positive. So yeah, it's evolved, and now what's happened more? I was going to conferences, I was getting invited, occasionally. Now we've partnered with some of the big associations. They've come to me And we'll talk about it again. We've done partnership deals. So the US Association of Treasurers, AFP, they came to me and said, would I speak at their national conference in Boston? I was like, yeah, okay. Oh, would I interview some of the treasurers live in the room at the biggest conference? Do they have 9,000 people sort of thing? I'm like, yes, I can do that. And it's just gone like that. But also that then led to other things. So that for my podcast, because it's very person focused on a treasurer about their treasury careers, very education focused. One stage I interviewed the new incoming CEO of the AFP. He said to me, I love your show. It's really great. It helps people with their treasury careers. Do you think you could put it up for CPD credits? So they how people develop themselves, or as they call it, CTP, which is Certified Treasury Professional. If someone listens to it, maybe they could get their credits. And I was like, yeah, great idea. Little did I know. It is a great idea, but it's lots of work. But when we went through the hard stage, anyone listens to the show, do a mini quiz, and then we give them some CTP credits. That has to be officially ratified each week and everything else. But the great thing is now, where I said earlier, you can't gather people's information. Now they do the quiz, but they have to fill in their information. So I've had, and I gave a shout out on the show actually to this week's podcast, just actually a couple of days ago, to all the people that have done it in the past month or so. I think it's been going 8 weeks or something like that. And I was like, crumbs, I've got to go through these names. And I quickly read through these names of there's about 30 people that have done it. But I have all their contact information. I've connected to them. A lot of them I knew, but there was about 30, 40% I didn't know. And suddenly they're becoming connected to me. Oh, thanks for doing this for us. I'm like, yeah, but I'm also doing it for me and the business, and I'm connected to those guys. So that's elevated it. So now we've done that. And then following on from that, they said, oh, actually, we want to get more people into studying with us. Could we partner with you and you introduce us, and you'll get a discount code so people will come and join us. And that's then also led to more partnership agreements with both them, other organizations. We've got a sponsor now on the show, ICD, but be very careful with your sponsors, I would say. Mine are very much stay in your lane or whatever it is. They are suppliers to treasurers. So we've got one which talks about signatures, signatory management. And that's a big thing for fraud and stuff like that. Signatize, they're a partner on the show. We've got Fusible. They do about company structures. Now, it all sounds quite technical, but the fact is, if we just advertise them or we partner with them on our website page, they go, oh, wow, actually, that's going to be useful to me. Someone's listening and going, oh, actually, if they become a client, we then get an affiliate fee. And you can just build that overnight. So don't think about that from day one. We've only done that, 6 years into the show. So that's one of the things as well.
That is amazing. It's a fantastic way to grow your business whilst doing something that is technically a cost, right? Like having a podcast is a cost because it takes your time. There's software involved in setting it up. And would you say, like, what other kinds of returns have you gotten from the show, Mike? Like in terms of clients or other growth opportunities and partnerships?
Well, the biggest one you and I have talked about really is I wanted to go to a gig in Luxembourg with my wife. And I said, oh, I want to go. She said, well, let's just go. I said, no, well, we could. Why don't I do an event? I tell you what, why don't I record the podcast live in a room in Luxembourg? Let's go across. And she was like, well, okay. And then we got 3 amazing guests. I got the international treasurer for Amazon, the international treasurer for Blackstone, international treasurer for Apparum. Got the 3 of them live on stage. And I just interviewed the 3 of them for an hour about their treasury careers. So 6 o'clock, 6:30, interviewed them for an hour in front of an audience of treasurers. And even the local association said, we don't get this many members come to our local meetings. I went, I know, because this is great content. We had like 80 people in the room. And then it was weird because everyone was like, right, come on, we'll go networking afterwards. I went, no, I'm off to a gig. Bye. And to this day, it was such a great evening. But I thought, hang on, we could do this. This worked rather well. And then we started to do it in London and thought, so again, I interview these treasurers and I was thinking, okay, how are we going to host this? We did one pre-COVID. It was a nightmare. The audio was terrible. The location wasn't that good. We had to pay for the room. Well, I got one of the software suppliers to pay for the room or contribute towards the bar bill. Okay. So the way that we do it now is we partner with law firms. They want to be in a room with treasurers. So we say, look, can we use your auditorium? Can we use your conference room? Yeah, come on, bring them in. And now we use Herbert Smith or Kramer Levin Herbert Smith, or the other way around, in London. And we go to their room. They have like a massive conference area. We get 120, 150 treasury professionals. And in November, for instance, I interviewed the global treasurer for Porsche, the global treasurer for Tesco, interviewed them in front of 120 of their peers. It was amazing. Everyone came across, live event. And originally when I did it, suddenly then I got the bar bill. It was like £2,500. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's my credit card. Okay, that's expensive. But also I was in a room with my clients and my candidates, and you're giving them value and you're mingling with them. And so you get to know all of them, you get all their contact details as well, which is great. But more than that, I was thinking, okay, if this is going to scale. And then I started to go to these sponsors, and I was like, look, can you pay for the bar bill? Okay, yeah, we'll pay for that. And I'm like, hang on. And now we get 5 or 6 sponsors. We're doing it, as I say, New York. We now do it across the world. We do 2 sessions in New York, 2 in London. This year I've done 2 in Texas. Well, so I'm doing the national conference in Boston. Then in Europe, I'm doing the Netherlands. We've done Dublin, where I saw the lovely, Deirdre. She emptied my bank account by all the drinks that evening. It was a big evening. It was great. And you saw it was like great content. You learn a lot of things. You learn a lot of things along the way. Try and avoid school holidays. We were just edging into that. The previous one we did in Dublin before was before the school holidays in the sort of May time. And this time we had to creep into June. It was the only time they had the room free. And it was great. We had like 50, 60 people. The previous one we had 90. So you really see the audience, and it's free. That's another thing to say. Don't charge your guests or don't charge your audience. Some people said, oh, we could charge an entrance fee. I've said, let's not charge, but then make sure that we do as much pre-marketing. But now the sponsors, depending on the size of event, they might pay, to be in a room with treasurers. They might pay anything for the smaller events, say €5,000, £5,000 for the small events. For our larger events, 100 people plus, we're getting $7,500, $10,000, depending on it. Our combined, and I say this on there, our combined price for our Chicago event in middle of September, which is a new event. That's one of the things. Don't be afraid to scale it down. We're charging less for that. And then we're saying, right, the main event, in New York, which I've got, is 90% full, 100 odd people already signed up 9 weeks before, but we're going to do 50 in Chicago. And I've said, well, let's bundle it together, $10,000. They've gone, oh, yes, please. And I've got people lined up for that as well. So they get to, and what do they get out of it? They get to share a room with their potential clients. We do the pre-marketing for them, and we, share the name so they can do all that work and everything else. And then they get to sit in a room with their prospects, and thanks very much. And they love it.
Okay. Oh my gosh. First off, that's incredible that you're doing that. And I know you've been doing this because we've worked together, right? But let's get real. For somebody listening, they might be thinking, holy shit, that's a lot of work. So what systems or processes keep all of this running for you without you burning out?
I think I've got an amazing PA, Carly. Big shout out to her. She does lots of it and stuff like that. We will be bringing someone in, a virtual assistant at some stage, as we sort of, we're still really, we're only 2 years properly into the live events. So that's one of the things I would say. It didn't start off like this. It started off with, a hotel in Lambeth, in London, with terrible sound, with everything else, so you can only get better from there. One of my guests, if you like, he had a microphone, but he seemed to use it more as a wand and waving it all around the room. And I kept saying, look, could you put it by your mouth so we can hear you? And we couldn't actually use the audio. So that's one of the first things I'd say. I would go back to basics and think, right, do an event, maybe forget about the sponsorship to begin with, just cover your costs maybe and stuff like that. But do it for the content for the podcast. That's what I do. I've also had lots of pressure from guests, from sponsors rather, who said, oh, we want to introduce ourselves before. No, just say no, because it takes the energy out of the room. Oh, we want this. I went, to be honest, and we've had it, actually, we've walked away from one sponsor. I said, look, I don't believe we fit, we're not, because all they want to do was sell. And I was like, that's not the point to our event. The feedback that's come from the feedback from the guests themselves, from the attendees. They've actually said to me, we love this. It's not that salesy. Yes, there are some sponsors around the room because, yeah, we've got to pay for it. And this is, you're giving me a free drink, Mike. It's got to be paid for. I understand that. They don't mind that, and we keep it to only say 4 or 5 sponsors. If you're thinking about it, they have 4 people in the room. So you've got 12 to 16 people amongst a room of 120, 150. They're going to talk to a sponsor for 5-10 minutes. So what? It's like, you're not selling your soul sort of thing. And that's a really good way to do it. But I would say keep the podcast first, get your content. So if I think about scaling it back as well, when I'm doing the Chicago event, we won't make money on Chicago, but we'll cover cost. So it won't cost me to go there. That was why I did it as well. But I've got sponsors. It's this magic triangle, if you like. So the sponsors help pay for the cost for me to get there. I'm there in a room with my prospects and my candidates and my clients. And my candidates and clients, what are they getting from it? They get education. They get to listen to treasurers who have made it. They're the top treasurers. And you've got in that room a whole mix. You've got the junior treasury guys who are just starting their careers. Oh, that's great. They're great advice. And then they mix. Or you've also got the senior treasurers hearing some of the war stories of some of those treasurers are going, oh, yeah, I wouldn't want to do that either. When we had Wolfgang, the treasurer of Porsche, he was talking about commodities being a big thing last year, and in fact, still this year and ongoing, but how they were handling it. And he was giving some stories which I hadn't even heard. He was like, oh, this is how we manage it, and that's we hedge the risk. And it was, oh, bloody hell, this is amazing. Great value for the audience.
And, that's a really great point, actually, because, one of the questions I was thinking of for people listening is they might be thinking, again, like that, if I have a small niche or if I'm bringing guests on, how do I make sure that I keep things fresh and not fall into kind of like, oh, it's the same type of person, same type of guest, and it's the same questions I'm asking them every time? How can they make sure that they avoid that so the podcast stays interesting? What do you do, Mike? Because all your people are like Treasury career professionals.
They're all Treasury career professionals. The good thing for me, lucky thing for me, I would say, is that, as I say all the time, is that within 10 feet of me at any conference, there are 10 treasurers. They've all got exactly the same job title. But, I say, well, they all do the same job, right? And everyone goes, well, no, they don't. That one's different. I said, no, exactly. Someone's got loads of cash. Someone's got a load of debt. Someone's got a centralized where they all have everything treasury at the center. One says, oh, no, we let the businesses manage it, or we just oversee it, so it's decentralized. So it's centralized. You've got all these different varieties of different things. Just thinking out loud, I was thinking about some of your, we did a session in Dublin recently, and you had the 3-4 of us up on bar stools just talking. And again, people go, oh, this big setup and everything else. I was talking to a lady last night about Chicago. She's go, oh, do you need the auditorium? Do you need this? I went, no. I said, need a microphone, 3 bar stools, 4 bar stools. I don't want to stand up all the time. And then theatre style seating. So just a bit in the round sort of thing. Just be there. I said, we'll be there for 6:30. Is there a bar next to you? Oh, yeah, there's one across the street. I said, great. And then we'll go there. So it doesn't organize refreshments and things. So if you're downscaling it, or someone like, you could do what we did in Dublin. You could grab that, have a microphone, and have a room of 10 or 15 of your prospects and talk to them about their problems. What are their main problems? Pre-brief your speakers and say, look, this is what I want to cover. These are the areas. Make sure they're rehearsed. There's nothing worse. Give them some warning of those questions. Each time you can mix up the questions if you want. We tend to keep them exactly the same or along a theme, which is how they started their careers, because all of them start differently. And you'd be surprised. I think everyone falls into it, does different things, to how they then developed it. And then we talk about some of the biggest issues they face or the challenges. That's when we get a bit more input from them and say, right, if you were sitting in that audience, what would you want to hear about? What is keeping you awake at night? And then we sort of gather together their ideas, reshare it with them and say, right, we could talk about that for the hour. Well, and then takeaways. And always do takeaways, always finish on takeaways. Quick one, quick tip. Something I had learned, and that's actually, it's a thing I've learned for public speaking as well. Never finish on Q&A, because there's always a Bob. There's always a Bob in the audience. Bob was a guy in Chicago, and also you're the ringmaster, you're in charge. So make sure you're protecting your guests. So I had these 2 amazing ladies. I had Raquel and Kerry, brilliant, and Bob in the audience. Bob was a white male, late 50s, between jobs, obviously massive chip on his shoulder or plank on his shoulder. He was very upset about life. And he put his hand up. I want to know why the panel thinks I am being overlooked for jobs. Is it because I'm a white 58-year-old male in Chicago, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, and I looked at these two amazing ladies and they literally look like rabbits in the headlights going, oh my goodness, he's not going to. And I went, right, Bob, I'm not putting that question to my ladies. And they both went, oh, thank goodness. I said, Bob, that is a question that you and I can discuss over coffee or maybe something stronger in the bar later. But I can tell you, yes, there are ageist, racist, sexist people out there that you're being overlooked for jobs. But that's not a question for this room. That's a question for you and I, and we could do. And you can see him like, relaxing. Remember, you're in charge of the event. And what I'd say is, you don't want. Imagine if then we finish. And thanks for that, everyone. Let's go to the bar. Great. That what a negative downer to finish up. We always finish and leave room at the end for takeaways. And we say this to the, we give that, say 3 or 4 in the audience. You saw it in Dublin, and I said, right, what are the biggest? What I want is people to go away in the bar, or they're sitting there the next day to sit down and think, have their coffee and think, what was last night? That was good. Oh, actually, I should do that. If they can do one thing, one big takeaway in their audience, that's the key thing, sort of thing.
Love it. That's such a great tip. And oh my gosh, I'm going to be watching out for Bobs in every time when I'm having a session.
Oh, there are Bobs everywhere.
Well done, you. That was super leadership in that moment. So well done. That was a really great response for sure. And let me think, what else might my listeners benefit from learning about? I think like there's some hidden things, I guess, with events, planning events, hosting events, having podcasts, live or, virtual, whatever, that people don't talk about, but people absolutely need to know. What is the one thing for you that you think people absolutely need to know?
I think it firstly comes down to, it's not about you, it's about them. And as soon as you start to think, hey, I'm going to host an event, I'm going to be brilliant, shut up, just get out of the room. It's like, people have said to me, oh, I love your podcast. And it's not my podcast, it's our podcast. It's that I'm bringing to life the stories of my treasurers who I love and adore, because they're really interesting. I've done it 25 years. I don't think I would have done it more than 25 years if I was talking to really boring people every day. When I originally got into it, they said, oh, you have to talk to accountants, like, really? Oh. And I discovered treasurers aren't like that. Treasurers are generally the first of the bar and they're the last to leave it, as we saw in Dublin. They are really outgoing people. A lot of time, some are introverts, but the fact is they're really interesting. So what you're there is you're to provide them a mouthpiece. And your guests get really nervous. You say, hang on, I'm in charge. I'm going to make you look good. I've got one of my ladies in New York, Ty. She's really nervous about it. She's bloody brilliant. I've met her before. She's going to be great. But I said, look, I'm there to make you look good. If you don't look good, it's my fault. And she was like, oh, all right. I said, yeah, I'm going to handhold you through it. We're going to be well rehearsed. I'm going to go through. She's sitting between 2 other great treasurers, Predicto from Zimmer Biomet, Dennis Brower from Element, and basically we're going to have a conversation. We're going to have a chat about their careers that they might have in the bar afterwards, but it's more structured. So it's like, right, where's this audience going to get the gold nugget? So you're there to help do the mining of that, to sort of be the gold digger and go, right, okay, what are the nuggets? Pre-rehearse it, make sure they're rehearsed and they're ready so they can look good. Have a chat. And again, going back to, on a smaller scale, you could do this with 5 people in a room. You could do this and just like literally, and maybe do that. Think, actually, could I get 10 people in a room talking about their problems and stuff, but have some structure to it, talk about it. And then if it starts to roll from that, actually, yeah, we had 15 people say, you put it on LinkedIn. When I relaunched our New York event, I always worry we're going to have no one. We relaunched it about 2.5 weeks ago, because I got my third and final guest. Great. Sent it out. I thought we're going to have no one. Within 5 days, we were 50% full, a room 120. Within 8 days, we were 80% full. And now, as of now, we're about 90%. We're just like getting, so we'll be full. We'll have over 100 people in it. I never designed it like that. I thought, hey, let's get someone to pay for my flights to America. There you go. That does it. And then the other bit is, the flip side is, I'm in that room. If one of those clients, in actual fact, one of the clients just this week, great example, didn't design it. Said, oh, I can come to your event. I'm only 8 months into a new role, but I'd like, oh, by the way, I need to recruit, or I'm going to be recruiting. do you think you can help? And I said, well, yeah, because those are the people in that room. That's why I've been doing these events. He went, oh yeah, you know all these guys at that level, don't you? Yeah, because they come along. Oh yeah, yeah. I'll make sure HR talk to you because you've got access to those people. It's not just putting up a LinkedIn advert and waiting everyone. They went, no, you're talking to these people every day, every week. I was like, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, it's cool because you get to meet them in person. It's not like
Yeah,
online or anything else. That's really cool.
yeah,
And like from a podcast perspective, what's a mistake? Like, so you were doing this podcasting for 5 years, 6 years nearly before you went live.
yeah.
But what was a mistake that you made early on that you're like, oh, if I could go back, I wouldn't have done that. But like in telling the story, whatever
Yeah.
story you're going to share, it's to help others avoid it.
So it's not a mistake. One thing I would say is, and I got told this at a later stage when we were already 100% full in, is we've done every single week for 7 years. And that's been a lot of hard work, probably too much hard work. We got about 4 weeks, 3 weeks into the podcast, and I was going to do it every week and everything else. And then we didn't have anyone approved for week 4, right? Because we had to get approvals and people, and it takes longer for people to listen to it. And this is before you had tools like Descript. So I had to go through it manually. I then eventually got a podcast editor, and that was great. That really helped. But even then it was like crumbs. We were trying to push them on the shelf, get them approved, the top shelf, middle shelf, bottom shelf. And that was the thing. That is what I would do. Have this mini invented or fictional shelf. So yeah, 4 approved, 4 being approved, fully and ready to go, ready, prepared, wrapped up. 4 in the middle, being approved, and 4 lined up, 4 guests to try and get the show. Again, couldn't get people. So week 4, I had to do a solo show. Wasn't what I wanted to do. I did a good one, got good figures and stuff, but I think people were already quite nervous. Oh, is it going to be him every week? I was like, no, I don't want to do this, but okay. So that's what I would do. How can you avoid that? Maybe do box sets. People, and I talked to someone recently about this. I said, look, people love box sets or limited editions on Netflix, don't they? So why don't you do that? Maybe and again, there's a friend who wants to do a podcast, and I don't think he'll have the bandwidth to keep it going all the time. So I said, well, don't. I said, either record like 10 interviews, get them all prepared. Don't have to have all of them finished, but at least have 10 recorded or lined up. So then you could release the first couple. People are liking it. Then you could say, oh, download the rest, because people will binge listen. They go, oh yeah, I'll listen to that. They're listening in the gym, they're listening where they're doing it. And then you can have a break. And then you can see, what were your figures like? You can then reuse some of those episodes. You can do that. So maybe not committing to doing it every single week might be a good thing as well. I think the regularity, what I would say on the flip side, the regularity and the fact that we have leaned into this has made it a juggernaut ourselves. I didn't think I'd be a podcaster. I'm a recruiter. Now I'm a pretty good podcaster as well. Well, I joke with people. I got invited by JP Morgan a couple of weeks ago they flew me out to Paris to speak to 30 of the top treasurers across Europe. They got to their event, so to go along. Now, I got that because of the podcast. That wasn't just because of my recruitment bit. It was because of the podcast. They know that I talk to these treasurers. Said to a room of treasurers, guys, I thought I was a good recruiter 70 years ago. I was pretty good. And they're like, oh, right. I said, now I'm a bloody great recruiter. And they're like, oh, and I'm not like looking bigging myself up. Because I said, because of you lot. I said, because I've shared 400 plus of your stories. I've listened to you. Sometimes I don't want to necessarily, but we don't tell you that on there. But like sometimes I've heard your I've heard your troubles. I've heard your sob stories. I've heard your successes. I've heard your failures. I've heard all this stuff, and I'm just like, I now know, what you go through. And in some ways, people said, "Oh, you should be a treasurer." I'm like, no, thank you. I've heard enough of that. It's like, but the fact is, I'm being invited out, and they're saying, "Will you speak in front of 30 of the top treasurers across Europe?" Okay, then. It's like, that's what it does. It opens doors. You become the expert in your niche. Say own your niche. We said at the head of the show. You are the micro expert. The micro. I know, and that's it. But that's a play on words. But yeah, just do that. So other mistakes on the podcast. Good recording equipment. So you got here a nice. You don't have to have a really nice microphone. Don't have to. They're not, what I've got the, I think we've looked at this before. I've got a Podcast Pro microphone. I'm not getting any money for this, but the fact is, that's what I've recorded with. I used to have a Rode directional one, and it was great microphone, but like Deirdre, we move around a bit. So Podcast Pro is great if you move around a bit. The previous one, I listened back to some of the early episodes, and because before the script, and it was like, hello, and he's back. Oh, really? You've got your AirPods, and you are, again, Chris Ducker years ago, he said, have respect for your listener. You are the closest thing between that podcast and their brain. So, listening through the AirPods or whatever device you might use. And so you've got to respect the sound. So make sure you're giving the listener a really good experience. And now it's relatively easy per se, because I think, right, listen to the, talking to this, interview over this, you've never been better, do Zoom, hop on a podcast, talk to them. With my guests, I always have a pre-podcast call. That's a necessity, not a nice to have. Because they're probably as nervous as you. You might have done 30 of them, might have done 40. They've done none. They're like, oh. It also can prepare you. I would say that in recent years, there have been occasional times, should I say, that we didn't have the strongest guests, should we say, that I was going to need a lot more coaching with them and a lot more hand holding. Do they always make the full show? No, they don't. And that's been 5-6 years to have the courage to sort of say, why don't we make that just a conversation? And they're like, oh yeah, that's great. I'm like, yeah. So that's also a tough one. But yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, there's some really great nuggets in that, Mike. And, you mentioned JP Morgan and being invited over there to do
a chat.
To do a chat. Yeah. What are some of the other unexpected upsides of putting yourself out there with the podcast and the events?
I think now the weirdest one is photos. I was walking around Nashville in the Nashville US Treasurers Conference. Someone said, oh, you're Mike. I was like, yeah. I listened to you. Oh, can I have a photo? And I was like, oh, well, I was going to grab their camera. What photo of them? They went, no, with you. I'm like, are you sure? Like, what the heck? Like, really? This is why I've got a face for radio. That's why I do a podcast. And you become like a mini celebrity. And people are like, so in the last Dublin one, not this one we just did, but the one before, there was one of the ladies said, oh, I heard you at the National Irish Treasurers Conference. Started listening to the podcast. I love it. Listen to it every single week. I'm like, thanks very much. She said, oh, could we have a photo? I was like, what, you and me? Okay. Had a photo together, and, it was lovely, but the selfie thing. And I'm like, okay, that was weird. That was really strange, for someone that just doesn't. And then I got off the stage, and the guy said, oh, I saw you have the photo. I said, yeah, like, don't take the mickey. Yeah. He went, no, can I have one as well? And I'm like, okay, yeah. And I think, so the bit is, it's not about the photos. It's more that you're a part of people's lives. That, another one, Monique Aristabal, a big shout out to her. I'm in a bar in New York. Don't worry, it didn't get too bad after that. There's a lot of bar work in this. But I'm standing there talking away, chatting away, having a beer and a tequila, and it was great. And then and it was a treasurer's event and stuff. But this lady was standing next to me, and she goes, you? And I went, yes, me. So hi. And she went, speak again. I'm like, hi, I'm Mike. How can I help you? Thinking, okay, this is, call the police. This is weird. She went, you're Mike, the podcaster. I listen to you on my commute you do it on a Tuesday. You're the Treasury Career Corner guy. This is you. And I was like, yes, that's me. And she was like, I love this. Oh my God, I'm meeting you face to face. Oh, wow. And we had this chat, and I was just going, okay, this is really surreal that someone recognizing me from my voice. And I'm like, okay, I'll take that. And now it's gathered steam. Just keep supporting your audience. That's the thing. Keep on looking after them, and then it comes back. And, if you pay it forward now that, as said, you get education credits by listening to it from the National Association. This stuff, it's open doors, these partnerships and all this other stuff.
Incredible. And yes, Mike, you are famous in your niche. I am an influencer in your niche. And
it's weird.
It's not weird. It's cool. And it's cool in the sense that that's the goal for your niche, for everyone. And you
Yeah.
want love you or hate you, and your people love you. So it's cool. Well done, you.
Thank
And
you.
what's next for Mike and Treasury Career Corner? Any shifts, trends, surprises you're excited about?
I think now it just, I've always wanted to get the top treasurers. And I mean, actually, I gave this story yesterday. Now I'm less afraid about approaching them and stuff and trying to get guests if that's the right way. I had recently Chan, the global treasurer of PayPal, on the show. I saw him on LinkedIn. He did a post that he was relocated, been on the west coast of the US, gone to Singapore, did the international treasury piece, and he was thanking PayPal for supporting him and his family with all these moves. And he was moving back to be the global treasurer of PayPal on the west coast of the US. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. And actually, he wrote this really nice article on there and sort of about what had helped him with his family. And it was a bit of a thank you to PayPal, but also what had helped him with his treasury. And I thought, I'll send him a cheeky email over LinkedIn saying, hi, Chan, I do this podcast. This is what I do. Just wanted to ask. And it was actually a shout out to Kevin Michael, who the podcast coach as well. And he said, ask a question. Don't just say, hey, be on my show. Try where you can and ask a question. I said, do you think that you need to move internationally to be successful in treasury? To this guy in Singapore, thinking nothing more about it. Sent it off, woke up the next day, opened my phone, and I said to my wife, oh my goodness. She went, what? I said, the global treasurer of PayPal has come back to me and said, I listened to your podcast whilst I'm walking the dog in Singapore. I'm like, in fact, I was listening tonight. Another good one. Well done. Yes, I'll be on your show. I'm like, holy crap. Like, I'm like, this is opening doors, and I'm like, I now am getting to meet people at the top table and they go, oh, I've heard your podcast or know of it and stuff. It's know, like, and trust. And it's moving down that and moving into that. It's that, and the key thing is, we've said all about the podcast. I'm a recruiter at the end of the day. Now I can talk to a client and they go, well, what do you know about treasury? Well, pretty much I know 400 of you intimately. Plus, we're doing it 20 plus years. But more than that, the value we're giving to our audience, the value we're giving to our treasurers, now it's also given me that more, not arrogance at all, but more a confidence that actually I know what I'm talking about now. And I can talk to these guys. And, when it was exciting, the PayPal treasurer, and as soon as I got him, I'm like, right, who next? Come on, who's next? Who's next on the show? And actually, it makes it easier because a lot of people have heard of it now as well. So they hear of it. It's helped, look at partnerships. I did the partnership with AFP, not for the cash. I did it so that I thought, hang on, if they then approve it for the CTP credits, they'll push me out to their membership of like 80,000 members or something like that. That's how we can go. So I can own that niche. That's what I want to be in everyone's ears, I think.
Ooh, Mike, niche dominator of treasury professionals. I
Yeah.
love it. And folks, please take inspiration from this because this is totally possible for you too. Mike, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about treasury or maybe get involved in one of your events if there's somebody listening who could be a potential sponsor or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, first thing, go to treasurycareercorner.com. That'll take you to the podcast page so you can see the podcast and you see some of the ones we've done. Don't listen to the first ever ones. Or if you do, you think, okay, now he's a lot better. But, that'll actually give people inspiration. If you hear back some of the early ones, I can't ever listen to them. The audio quality is not quite as good. Actually, that's a nice quick one. If someone is a podcaster and they're struggling with content, we got asked by our podcast editor at the time. We were like 2-3 years into the show and we were not struggling for guests, but it's like, oh, what do we do for next week? And they said, why don't you do a revisit episode? I was like, what? And they said, you spoke to that person 3 years ago. Has anything happened? I said, well, we've gone through COVID, we've done this, or we're still in COVID. And so we just took the original show, remastered it, re-edited it, and then re-interviewed them. And a couple of them have moved jobs, a couple of them did, and it was great. It's a lot less work. A 15-minute interview, remastered the first half an hour, 40 minutes. Great, lovely. So go to those, treasurycareercorner.com. Obviously, hang out everywhere on LinkedIn, sign up for our newsletter, and you'll get to see my crazy face in the videos sometimes because Deirdre made me do it. There you go. So.
Mike, thank you so much for being on the show. I think a lot of what you shared has been incredibly inspiring for anybody who's looking to maybe venture into podcasting
Do it.
and or events.
It's free. It's free. You're going to be out there. That's the other thing. It's like you can put yourself out there. You know, people say, "Oh, I need a big microphone, I need this." You can actually do it on your phone. You know, like you can grab your phone, you can do it. I wouldn't recommend just doing it on your phone. I mean, with Descript and other tools, there are other tools available. I know people say Riverside. I personally like Zoom and Descript. They work really well for me. But you can do some of that stuff. Use a bit of ChatGPT to clean that up, and you can have a great show each and every week. The tools now, God, you know, 7 years ago, it was brutal. Now it's a lot easier. So the barrier to entry has really gone down. You can have a great conversation with your target audience and then pump it out there to the masses.
Love it. And I'll share a link for Descript underneath the show notes as well, because I use the exact same tools as Mike, as it happens.
Yeah.
Mike, again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Lovely to see you.
Phew, was that episode packed or was that packed? Here's your quick recap. Niche is your superpower. Own it, dominate it, and don't be afraid to go small. And you know what? I actually forgot to mention, I do have a niche domination checklist. I haven't shared it in donkey's years. If you want it, I'll add it to the show notes, so you're welcome to go and check it out. Podcasting opens doors you never expected, from all sorts of global partnerships to client leads and surprise selfies in New York bars. Live events don't need to be flashy to be profitable, just thoughtful, valuable, and focused on them, not you. And it's like I always say, it's about making your client the hero of the story. And that's why Mike's podcast has been so successful. When you do that with your podcast, with your content and everything, you shift the story into what's in it for them as opposed to what's in it for you. And that's what makes you more magnetic. Now, here's your next move. If you're even thinking about launching a podcast or live event to grow your business, go follow Mike. Head to treasurycareercorner.com and binge a few of his episodes. Then send him a cheeky little DM and tell him you found him through this show. And if this episode sparked something in you, share it. Text it to your biz bestie, post it to your stories, or send it to that friend who keeps talking about maybe starting a podcast someday. Someday, maybe today. Sharing the show helps this show grow, and it helps more entrepreneurs just like you master their business on their own terms. And of course, don't forget to rate, review, and follow the show wherever you're listening to us today. That'll make sure you never miss another conversation that's going to help you win clients, grow your impact, and scale with sanity. Catch you in the next episode, and until then, keep mastering your business.